everyone. Welcome to today's online event on Interpersonal Communication 101, the Basics and Foundation, presented by N4, the National Newcomer Navigation Network. Before we begin today's webinar, I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement that N4 is hosted at CHIO, which is located in Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them and this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. CHIO also honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. My name is Mariah, and I am a project coordinator with the N4 team. I will be hosting and moderating today's webinar. My co-host Andrew will be monitoring the question and answer and chat box today. And I'm very pleased today to introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Aliaa Dakroury. Dr. Dakroury is an associate professor at the School of Social Communication at St. Paul University. She holds a PhD from Carleton University's School of Journalism and Communication. She taught at the University of Ottawa's Department of Communication and Carleton University's Departments of Sociology and Anthropology, Law, and Journalism and Communication. She has taught numerous courses in subjects related to media, communications, and religion. Professor Dakroury is also the co-editor of the global media journal, Canadian Edition, and her publications appear in various journals including the Journal of International Communication, Media Development, the American Journal of Islamic Social Sciences, Studies in Contemporary Culture, the Journal of Intergroup Relations, the Global Media Journal, the Journal of Culture, Language, and Representation, among many others. And I just want to take a moment and give a really warm welcome to Dr. Dakroury. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. And our session today is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our N4 platform that will include a transcript within 24 to 48 hours following today's presentation. And if there's any technical issues that arise during today's webinar, we will inform you with details for an alternate makeup session. And before we begin our webinar, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce you to our platform features. Throughout today's session, we invite you to write your questions in the question and answer window. And if there's a question that you're interested in hearing the answer to, or if you have a similar question, please take a moment and upvote that question because we will prioritize those questions based on which ones are upvoted. And also today, Dr. Dakroury will be using an interactive software called Poll Everywhere. And my co-host Andrew will be putting the links to Dr. Dakroury's polls into the chat. And to access these, you will just need to copy and paste them into your web browser. And we will be monitoring your questions throughout today's session. And if there is any questions that we do not get to today, we will move these to the online discussion forum called Meeting Place on our N4 platform. And our speaker today has no conflicts of interest to declare. And with that said, I am going to pass it over to Dr. Dakroury.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to take part of this wonderful initiative, and also I'm so glad. Sorry, I'm so glad to see among the list of attendees former students of mine. So wonderful to see them and interact with them in this workshop. So I will share my screen now and. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the interpersonal communication 101 in part one of the webinar, and we will do a follow-up in 2 weeks on other themes. I'll try to cover as much as possible in this webinar, and our objective really today is to demonstrate how human and interpersonal communication is existent in our real life, and to understand the characteristic of that trait and how to develop an effective mode of communication, but also in this flavor of the newcomer navigator, we need to understand the importance of culture in effectively formulate our interpersonal communication, highlights of barriers of technology that we are living these days, and also touch on some factors that shapes our understanding or perception of people, of events, and how to better communicate. So to begin with, you will find in the chat box, Andrew will be posting for you now a question. So if you can click on that link and try to answer this question. So what is the one name only one interpersonal communication skill that you hope to gain or want to gain today after today's presentation? So use one word and using the link provided in the chat box. Now, the run out of the overview today of our presentation is, I will start talking about what is the importance of human communication generally. And as I mentioned, talking about the pros and cons of using technology. And then I will touch on 4 aspects of the importance of our human interpersonal communication. So I will talk about competent communication, how to develop a competent interpersonal messages, self-disclosure and self-conception, how to think about ourselves and to think about others, and also impression about others that we deal with in different contexts. And finally, I will talk about human emotions. Moving on, so what is human communication? And I will just touch very briefly about this theme because it will help us understand what is interpersonal communication. And usually we communicate, so for many, many reasons, but for the sake of this presentation, I will just focus on 3 important needs. So we communicate to satisfy physical need, identity needs, and social needs. So the first one is physical need, and satisfying relationship affects our body, our physical behavior. And so, and I'm sure many of you, since you are dealing with patient and as frontline workers and so on, you can know more than myself how stress, how depression, how high blood pressure could be relieved simply by communicating, and how having people supporting you can relieve your physical needs humanly, right? So lots of research about pregnant women, for example, if they are under stress, but communicate efficiently with a good circle of network, be it a family of support or doctors and nurses and so on, they might develop better communication and physically. Second point is identity needs. And so again, we communicate to satisfy our identity needs. The one thing that we think about is communication help us to know who we are. I mean, we tend to have selfies to reflect on ourselves, but you can see that deprived communication with people, sometimes it creates low self-esteem about ourselves. So communication does more to enable us to survive for ourselves. The last point, or the last reason why we communicate, is social need. So we communicate to satisfy our social needs. We have lots and lots of hats. So when we feel included, when we feel part of a group, when we have fun, when we are relaxed with each others, we have a strong support. And you can see that, for example, a big thing that we are living now, that with a lack of face-to-face human interaction, many people are deprived from this, in human interaction. But efficiently, we communicate to satisfy this social ties among loved one and friends and family and so on. Now, points to remember whenever you are communicating, and I will just, again, I might come back to that. You need to remember that not all communication seek understanding. Sometimes you make just a joke. A joke doesn't mean that you meant to send us a message per se, but You can just communicate for the sake of communication. And effective communication is not a natural ability. It's not that we are born with by default, that we know how to communicate, how to design messages that is effective for our audience, right? It is something that we should be trained to. Communication will not solve all problems, of course. It is just helping us to understand it. We have this assumption that more communication is always better. Actually, no, more communication is not always better. Imagine your Monday morning when you open your email inbox, how many thousands of messages, tons of communication is not so much good, right? Two more points. Communication is irreversible. This means that if you say a word, you cannot take it back. So it is important to create an efficient interpersonal communication dialogue with people that we need to carefully think about our utterance, our words, right? Channel makes a difference as well. So imagine if you want to, check on your child, for example, or a parent, and you send the wrong wrong tool or message. So sometimes we text, but it is more efficient to use a phone, so voice, and it's even better to go and talk to people face to face. So channels make a lot of difference in communicating. So moving forward, communication and technology, that's one thing that we're all struggling with. I know. But the one point that I want to make in this technology world, or the computer-mediated communication, that it is not as bad. According to lots and lots of research, that computer-mediated communication is actually creating lots of media richness, because we can use emojis, we can use this nonverbal cues that sometimes express our communication without even talking. And sometimes we use different synchronous versus asynchronous modes. This is alternative. Sometimes if you use only face-to-face, you cannot say all of what you want. The last point is also interesting, because it is a permanence of messages. If you have an email versus you have a meeting you can forget the information. But if you have a message or an email or something that is more written so far, it has permanence, so it lasts longer, so you can refer to. So sometimes communication is not as bad as we think of. The one thing that we need to be careful whenever we are dealing with communication and technology is really about culture. And this is what a term that we are referring to as intercultural communication. It's defined as a process by which a member or two or more than a culture exchange messages in a matter that is influencing their different perception and symbol system. I know its definition is weird, but let me explain it in details. Interpersonal communication is really key whenever you are designing and thinking about culture, right? So culture is a group of language, values, belief, tradition, custom. I would add food, music, anything related to people. And how we categorize ourselves in terms of culture is really determined of how we put ourselves in an effective communication mode. So for example, if we are in group, we think of ourselves inside the group. If I am a member of a language group, for example, I am inside. So I am always thinking in a positive manner. But if I am outside of the group, so if I'm for example, I speak Arabic. So if I am Arabic speaker, I am in group of Arabic speakers. But the out group will think, oh, what is that? What is this group is talking about? So the view is so different. And sometimes the co-culture is a subgroup that is a body of groups that is within the same group itself. I will give you some examples in the next few slides, but again, I want you to think about culture as a very important ingredient in that. Sorry. Oh, jumping. Now, the first point that is very key to effective interpersonal communication is component. And what I want really to pose and think about this, what is competent interpersonal communication is really about the balance between effective and appropriate communication. And I'll give you an example of that. My favorite example is really proposing. If someone wants to propose for a marriage, someone would say an effective way, an effective, pragmatic, practical way to propose is to really send an email or send a text. The question is, did the message pass? Yes. Did you receive it? Yes. Then it's effective. Yes, it's an effective, but the question is it appropriate? Is it appropriate to propose to someone by sending a text? Well, I don't think so. So a competent would be to balance between an effective and appropriate message. So if you cannot go in person, maybe flowers would do it. Anyways, to move on that and to elaborate on competent, which is a very important ingredient in interpersonal communication, how open-mindedness is key. So to have a competent communication, you have to be open-minded about the different culture. And the three mistakes that we always do is one, ethnocentrism, that we, and I'm not saying we as anyone, I'm just hypothetically saying that anyone who thinks that one culture is superior than the other culture is what is called ethnocentrism. It's a big mistake in interpersonal communication. The second is prejudice. And prejudice is unfairly biased and intolerant attitude toward, again, the out group. If I'm not a part of that group, I will think why they are doing that. Why are they addressed like that? Why they are talking like that? Why their food smells like that? And so on. So that is kind of unfairly biased attitude simply because I am outside of that group. The third mistake of culture and competence is stereotyping. This is quite straightforward. It's an exaggerated or a generalization about a group. So if you have met one person, you assume that every single person will act and behave in the same way, in the same manner, which is very wrong, and it's kind of incompetent to say so. So now, what then can we propose? Competent leads to an effective communication. So maybe I will just go a bit faster to lay down this quickly. So competence require open-mindedness, as I mentioned, and dealing with others. It is not that I'm talking only to myself. I'm dealing with human beings. I need to be open-minded. Competence also is situational, that is dependent from one person to another, and importantly, from one situation to another. You can deal with a situation effectively and competently in one time, and sometimes not the same duplicate in other time. Also, competence required mindfulness in shifting gears and styles. You need to change depending if you are speaking to a child, different than speaking with a senior, different than speaking with a friend, and so on. The last point is competence could be learned, and that is a good news, that we can train ourselves, and this is the experience that we get from dealing with, workplace and different contexts. We gain skills of dealing with people, and we became competent in this kind of situation. Now, characteristic of competent communication, what it looks like. A competent person and someone who's, again, have competence in his or her interpersonal communication always observe his or her own behavior and style, what we call self-monitoring. So if I am judgmental, no. If I'm open-minded, yes, and so on. So self-monitoring yourself is really key. Another one is you should have a large repertoire of skills. So being competent, meaning that I'm not only talking, but maybe using nonverbal communication, maybe using some jokes, maybe using examples, maybe have some information background about the topic I'm talking about, and so on. Adaptability is also key. That is, you need to pick the right response in different situations. So you adopt and do new and different situations. You need to be able to perform skillfully. That is practice, 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 practice. The last one is empathy, that we will talk about toward the end of the presentation when I mention emotion. But it is very important whenever we are dealing, especially with newcomers and people from different culture, that we take perspective, that we feel involved in empathy with the group or the recipient of my message. The second point in interpersonal communication is how you see yourself, self-conception. This is a set of perception that you hold about yourself. And sometimes you can say, oh, what is the importance of that? Actually, it's so important, because the way that you think about yourself is projected in the way that you are dealing with others. So there is a self-conception, how you hold perception about yourself, how you self-estimate yourself. You think that you are self-worthy. Also, you need to be self-compassion. You should not be so harsh and critical of yourself all of the time. So if you do that, by default, you will reflect on your interpersonal communication, and people will say, this person is so dry, because you have not even a self-compassion with yourself. And you need to have also self-control, because if you have to meet certain goals in your career and so on, and meet some social expectation, but you need to tell yourself, hey, I need to stop doing that now. Be realistic and have self-control on your actions. So it is all about self-conception. How it looks like. It looks like that. And I really like this diagram because it gives you a good idea of how positive and negative cycle of self-conception could reflect on yourself and behavior. So imagine if you are in a cycle that you have low self-esteem. I cannot do it. I have negative thoughts. Then you will have a reflection of, I give up. I cannot do it. And if you cannot do it, oh, I failed again. And it takes you on and on and on and drag you in a negative cycle. Versus a positive cycle of self-conception would be, I can do it. It's hard, but I can do it. I have a self-esteem in myself. I believe in myself. I have a desirable behavior. And by the end, you end up by have a positive attitude, a positive end. I did well. So you are good to yourself. So think about that whenever you try to express yourself also. How we develop our self-conception, how we develop that, actually you will be surprised, but we develop that since we are very, very young. Reflected appraisal, that is something that you try to do it when we are children. So we appraise yourself, we self-esteem ourselves. I did well, I did a good job. But also the significant other, if you are a partner, is always, criticizing you consistently, you will feel down. If you are a parent and you are always, giving negative feedback to your child, by the end, they will not have a self-conception. So that's a second part. Social comparison is a big thing as well. When we compare ourselves of, different people in our network. Reference group, if you are a lawyer, for example, and you always compare yourself with your reference group, with the rest of the lawyer, what they did. Do they have, house? Do they have a car? Which make? And so on. So all of these affecting your self-conception. The last point is the culture, norms, and values. And on that, it is very interesting to see that if you are a member of individualistic culture, and most likely it is a Western, North American, European culture, it is really about you. I'm doing that, and I don't care about what other things about. But if you are part of a collectivist culture, and I'm talking about Eastern, Asian culture from a research perspective, usually person belonging to that culture, they bring the self-conception from the groups and loyalty and uncles and aunts they belong to. So they are looking to these people as the point of reference. So you need to be careful about that as well. Now, what could be hints to create and communicate your self-concept? One, have a very realistic expectations about your abilities, about your traits and goals. Have a realistic perception of yourself as well. Most importantly, you need to have the will to change. Sometimes people are trained, or especially for immigrants like myself, for example, you have spent, I mean, half of your life, how many years of your life before you migrate to a different place. Sometimes you do not have the will to change. I'm so old, I cannot change. Well, if you want to have an effective interpersonal communication about yourself, you need to have the will to change and the skill to change. So seek opportunities to change your self-conception. And what we always say, that a healthy self-conception is always flexible. It's up and down. I'm doing this today, and it's okay to, not feeling well one day and moving on. And to that note, accepting changes from one situation to another, meaning that if you fail or didn't do well in one situation, it doesn't mean the end of the world. Again, accept changes and adopt to new possibilities and opportunities. I'm doing good in, okay. I'm doing good in time. Now, a very good question. Should I talk about myself or not in an interpersonal communication? Disclosing yourself or not? Well, according to the book, we have pros and cons, we have benefit, and we have risk. Quickly, if you have in a situation and you find that disclosing yourself would be in a form of self-clarification. So if you have a situation where you are so misunderstood as being the cruel employer, as not caring about your, teamwork and so on, sometimes doing self-clarification would do benefit for you. Okay, you need to be careful about that. Self-validation, you validate your image. If you disclose, I didn't mean that. Clarifying this, ethically a moral obligation. Sometimes it's a self-mechanism. You need to be careful about that, but self-mechanism characteristic maybe. On the other hand, the risk of self-disclosure could be risky depending on the situation. You have to really be careful and assess that. It could hurt the other person if you have a meeting and you say some words and this word is misunderstood and you go and defend yourself. Maybe you hurt the other person, maybe you lose control, maybe you lose the influence if you are sometimes, and this is kind of image, if the boss or the team leader or something like that, for example, having a superior role and to self-disclose, I shouldn't be doing that. People will think of me as not too much in control. I will lose my influence. I will decrease my situation and my ego. And maybe I will have this negative impression on others. What to do? There is no one single way to think about it, but you have to always to weigh what is more important than the other one. Okay, so that's disclosing the self or not. Now, before I move to the second point is guideline of self-disclosure. That's a good question. Should I or not? Should I justify? Should I open up to people or not? Well, that's really dependent. You have to ask yourself, is the other person that you are disclosing to important to you or not? I'm thinking always of partners, for example. If a spouse and his or her partner has a misunderstanding, if the person is important to you, you would disclose yourself and show, I didn't mean it. I was misunderstood. There is a miscommunication, right? Also, is this a risk of disclosing reasonable or not? I will not be losing my job, for example, or something. Is the self-disclosure appropriate? If I explain myself, for example, in a situation and some inappropriate language will pop up, don't do it. Also, if the self-disclosure is relevant to the situation in hand or not. If you're talking about something in the past and dealing with it now, like why you are bringing it up now? Why you are talking about this situation again? I wouldn't do it if it's, again, not relevant to the situation. Also, if the self-disclosure is reciprocal, meaning that if you are in a position that you are always the one who's opening up and the other person or persons are not doing the same. So you feel I'm the only one who's doing this. And it might happen in our real life, right? So you need to think about this as well. And the last point is the effect of self-disclosure is constructive. It should not be harmful to you. So if, having a constructive criticism, and if I open up to my, coworker, for example, if we will have by the end a very healthy relationship, well, yes, go do it. So all of these are questions that you have to ask yourself before deciding whether or not to open up and self-disclose yourself to any other party. Okay. Now, two more points I need to touch before I end this talk, and I still have a good 10 minutes. That's good. Impression about the others. That's something that we always have. We always hear this word, put yourself in my shoes. You didn't understand me. Well, impression about others is very important if you are dealing with competent interpersonal communication, an effective one. What does this mean? Lots of factors are influencing how you perceive people, how you view others, right? The first one is access to information. If you have all the information, and we have to admit that none of us knows every single thing about the closest people in our life, right? I have my kids and I have no idea of what they are doing in everything, and it's the same for everyone. But if you have new information coming up, you might change your perception about the person. For example, if you are always having this perception, this image about your boss as the dry, bossy, very firm, not making any, facial expression, very neutral every day. And one day, the access to information that you're invited to a party, and all of a sudden you see your boss, wearing casual and dancing. Oh, that's a new piece of information. You have now influenced your perception about this person based on the new information that you got from him or her, right? And we are living that every day. It's an ongoing experience. One important thing that sometimes we oversee it is the physiological influence. I know it's funny, but this is what I'm saying to my students. Imagine if you are hungry and I say, I want you to attend that meeting, and you are hungry. I mean, hunger, biological cycles, for example, it's affecting the way we perceive others. Then you just want me to be done this presentation as soon as possible because I'm hungry. And sometimes you have a meeting on, business or lunch meetings and so on. So you need to be careful on that, because sometimes your perception of people might be different based on the situation. Senses, for example, this is one of the very important cultural things. Lots of people have, use lots of spices in their food. And so if you smell physiologically something, you have a perception about these people, what they are eating, how they are acting, and so on. So you need to be careful about that. If you are tired and attending a meeting, you perceive the meeting in a negative way, you will not retain any information, and you will not get doing anything. So also in an interpersonal context, you need to make sure that all of these physiological influences are off. The last thing is age. You cannot, and we cannot deny that age is one of the very important factors. So if you are dealing with your, senior mom, for example, who is suffering from dementia, for example, what kind of perception would you have if this person was not your mom or not your relative? So people need to have empathy about, these kind of physiological influences, and not to have the prejudice and stereotype and, oh, well, because they are doing this, or, oh, well, because they smell like that. and so on, right? Sorry. Okay, so now what influence our perception of others? Third point is, so we said access to information. Second is physiological influence. Now social influence. We have that, and I say guaranteed because we have that everywhere. The sex role and stereotype can affect our perception of people. So if we are dealing with, a customer or a student or a coworker who's a female, I always have this role of a female. She's emotional. She's not as, part with her coworker, a male one, and so on. These kind of sex and gender roles are social influence and can affect the way that we perceive on people. This should not be one of the important trait, I would say, in our day-to-day practice. Second is occupational role. Everyone who has a role in a workplace can affect them. So for example, I don't know, I have my friends, for example, they beside professors, I have lawyers, my friend lawyers, and all the perception about lawyers are super serious. If you have a friend who's an accountant, he's always calculating, they are doing this and so on. So we have the perception about people simply because they are doing one job, not necessarily. So we need to be careful about that. The last one is the relational role, that is the role that we do in relation to people. So if I am a mother, for example, people would have a conception of me as such and such. If someone who is a single, for example, they would think about this person as such and such. So you need to make sure that not these influences are done in a negative manner. It's okay to think about it, to gather information, but not to think about that in a negative manner. The last point of what influence our perception is the culture influence, and that is super important. Some cultures, they are not so much verbal. And again, I'm talking about research, in communication research. Usually Western culture are very vocal, are very using verbal communication, but Eastern culture generally, they use silence as a mode of communication. You should not have that as a perception when you are doing interpersonal setting. Let me give you a very quick example. You are someone who's dealing with people, and you have a couple, and you are talking, asking questions, and you are always finding that the husband always replying and the wife is always silent. And you would think about this. That is patriarchal. That is not acceptable. And this, what about gender? This is power relations, so on. Now you need to step back and think about the talking, sometimes silent, denote lots of meaning. You need to understand the culture and not to only have a perception about this, negative or positive, either way. Thinking about logic and shaping messages, and people sometimes when they have a social obligation, they would deal and talk in a specific way and so on. So if I'm a mother and I will have a parent-teacher meeting, I will just go and defend my child, but you should not have a perception of me as I am a mean person. Not necessarily, but because I have a social obligation to do so. Anyway, so these are just few examples. Common tendency in self-disclosure. I'm just looking at my timer here. One is that we make snap judgment about people without any knowledge. And that's not so much recommended. You need to know information first. That we tend to depend on the first impression to make this overall judgment, being positive and negative impression about a person based on one single characteristic. He didn't shake my hand. He is mean. She didn't accept my gift. She is mean. Well, not in that way. We judge also ourselves in a very positive manner versus others. When we compare them in the same situation, I behave and I judge myself. I didn't mean it. I was just trying to be nice. But if someone else in the same situation, I will just judging this person as, not effective, as mean, as rude, and so on. We are very influenced by the obvious. We look at the, the face matter. We don't look more about understanding people in our social circles and so on. And I'm not talking about you or me. I'm talking about, generally. This is what we need to understand in interpersonal communication. And we, most of the time, we assume that people are similar like us. I like tea. It doesn't mean that everyone likes tea. In a meeting, in a meeting, I was like, okay, let's have tea. Well, if people like coffee more than tea, it might be, very silly, but actually it's important because it seems as if I don't care about the others. It is not nice. Now, the last point of my presentation is really emotion, and I will try to wrap up in less than 4 minutes. Emotion. Emotion is the ability to communicate our feelings. Oh, I don't think we effectively do this, many of us. So what are emotion? And I will just very briefly, there are physiological changes that emotion, if you are scared, your heartbeat will, pop, you have if you are anxious, you have your jaw, for example, clenching and so on. I'm not talking about that. Cognitive interpretation that for example, when you think, your mind, if you have an emotion, your mind will process things cognitively and interpreting in a certain way, but not that's what I'm talking about as well. What I'm talking about emotion is about the outward expression. That when you, for example, you are angry and you are frowning, if you change your posture, if you have always someone in the meeting and crossing their hand like this, if you go to a meeting and you sit on a chair and you put your, your bag on the other chair, all of these emotions are very important in interpersonal communication that you need to think about. How to do, what influence you in an interpersonal communication? Personality. If person by default, every one of us, they have their own personality. Second is culture, is that the position of the emotion in our culture. Sometimes, fear or happiness is more in one culture versus others. If you go visit someone, sometimes you have a fancy gift because this is a culture thing versus others are not. Biological and sex differences is both also very important in expressing emotions. We are always thinking about that. If boys don't cry, it's wrong, but girls, oh, that's okay. It's okay to be emotional. So these kind of things is not supposed to happen if we have a perception again about context. Social roles. I mean, I imagine that people, and I'm sure many here are part of that group, people who are working in frontline in health, for example, say in emergency department, they cannot by default express their emotion. If someone is dying or someone is so sick, they cannot just cry. They cannot express their emotion freely as someone who is working, for example, a teacher. So again, this is something that we can think about. Fear of self-disclosure. Sometimes if you are holding a position, you have a hierarchy and you are not to express emotions. So if someone is retiring in your group, for example, you will not be emotionally expressing, oh, I'm sad that this person, no, I should be firm, I should not be doing this, and so on. Again, there is no right or wrong, but these are stuff that factors influencing us. Now, very briefly, I have some suggested guidelines in expressing emotion in interpersonal setting. The first one is recognizing your feeling. Be aware that your feeling is one of the most important way to effective communication. And so usually people from a different culture, they recognize their feeling more than other culture. You need to choose the best language. Again, sometimes when we call the counterfeit statement the poker face, if you express specific, words in some situation, you need to really choose the best language. And again, think about my example of proposing to someone by flower versus someone who's, proposing by email. Sharing multiple feeling also is one of the recommended suggested way. So often we have several emotional feeling, but we tend to express our negative feelings first or only, right? Which is not, ultimately okay. Recognize the difference between feeling and acting. Sometimes you have a meeting and you are super anxious, and instead of recognizing that I have a fear as a feeling, you just call your boss and say, I am canceling because I'm sick. Technically, you lied and you act like a sick because you did not recognize your feeling. And it's okay to be fearful. It's okay to be afraid of something or anxious. Before last is accept responsibility of your feeling by using the word I language. For example, if you say, you are making me angry, versus you say, I feel angry. There's a whole difference between both. You hurt my feeling versus I feel hurt when you do such and such and such. So accept responsibility of your feeling. The last one is choose the best time and place to express your feeling. So for example, if you are tired, and you have a very, very important decision in your life, I wouldn't recommend doing this while you are tired. You should have, it is very wise to wait until you select the appropriate time frame so you can cognitively think and weigh different ways, and then to share your feeling that I am tired. And you always find this in movies when, spouses and partners are, one coming from a job and wait, I need to discuss with you a new car. Wait, it's not the best time to do this. Anyways, now, this is the end of my presentation, but what I want you to do now, please, is that to go back, Andrew will post now the link for, again, Pool Everywhere. Click on the link and share with me what is the interpersonal communication skill that you have gained today? What is the new knowledge that you have gained today after listening to me in this presentation? The pool will be open, so feel free to do it. And again, thank you very much. Before you go, again, Andrew will be posting this survey also on Pool Everywhere. It will be available until tonight. So I would really appreciate if you can, again, share with me what you think about in your presentation. Thank you so much for having me. And I did it in 44 minutes. Maria, you'll be proud of me. I will pause now and open up first question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dakroury. There is so much rich information in your presentation, and we have about 10 questions here. And I'll just invite everyone to use the thumbs up symbol to upvote the questions you're particularly interested in hearing the answers to, because we'll start at the very top. And our first question is in relation to self-concept. Is it possible to change your self-esteem from negative to positive, and if so, how?
Oh, okay. I think we have to also always acknowledge the notion of self-concept and self-esteem by training. And this is something that we are educated to do. If you are coming from not a culture, but I mean, it is the parents start to do this when the kids are so young, when they are treating them equally, when they self-boost them. And so they are trained and they come along as adults who self-esteem themselves. So it starts very, very early. But I think pragmatically, someone should always remind themselves of the uniqueness of themselves. So if, for example, I'm not, say, for example, I will tell you about myself. I'm immigrant. I immigrated to Canada some 25 years ago. I say, I speak English with an accent. I don't have a self-esteem. Well, I say, well, wait a second. I need to have the self-conception of myself. This is my second language. Instead of speaking one language, I'm speaking now two. I'm speaking now three. So realizing the value of that you are doing as a person is very important. And maybe the third recommendation is comparison. The big mistake that we always do in self-conception and self-esteem is compare ourselves to our peers. This person, again, speaking of language, this person is speaking very fluently. We are both immigrants, but this person, oh gosh, he or she did this and that and that. I don't think this is very positive. You need to think about yourself and uniqueness of your situation and your trait and characteristic as very important. And at that point, name it, list it, and build on it. And I think this will be very effective.
Great, thank you. And our next question is, what is the best thing to do if you make a mistake and offend someone during interpersonal communication?
Sorry, what is the question again?
What is the best thing to do if you make a mistake and offend someone during interpersonal communication?
Offend. Oh, okay. Well, it's a tricky question. It depends on I would say it depends on the power relation. If you are in a power relation that would enable you to make an adjustment, just do it right away, because you will be on the forefront. So for example, if you are the lead of presentation and you offend someone, you need to adjust it right away. So for example, and I think and again, I'm talking about this very, very generally, apologizing and committing mistakes is a very honest, straightforward interpersonal skill. I think, to be brave enough to consent and say, I did a mistake. I do apologize for this. And you can do this very nicely. It could be done, with experience, when you are more comfortable doing it for the first time. And it's absolutely fine to do mistakes, and human beings make mistakes. So doing it and making it in a bold way, it will create a very positive, again, you see the cycle that I mentioned to you. It creates a self-esteem for the person that I technically offend, but also it will create a positive vibes among peers and attendees in this setting that I am in.
Okay,
I
thank you.
think.
And our next question is about communication across cultures. So nonverbal communication is very important in patient intake. How do you manage to get accurate information when you are inhibited from seeing facial expressions in cultures who wear face coverings while maintaining cultural sensitivity?
Oh, well, that is very tricky question. Just again, for the sake of clarification, nonverbal communication entails more than facial expression. As I mentioned, using hands is one of the very famous ones. So, and nodding face, like using your face, saying yes or no, or making this sign or making this sign, thumbs up. So there are lots, I mean, the nonverbal communication is a very rich, very, very rich, I would say, field. For me, I cannot say, because I haven't dealt with people with a face covering, except for, very personal lay setting, not formal. So I cannot speak of that. But what I can share, that nonverbal communication could be expressed in a variety of things, by body forms, hands, movement, also creating space. As I mentioned, if you are attending a meeting and you have someone always, putting the chair beside him or her, the jacket. This means this person is not comfortable, but he or she cannot express that. But unintentionally putting this jacket, it is just sending a message to everyone. I don't want anyone to sit beside me, right? So it could be seen in a different way. And I think by experience, skilled, I mean, people like yourself and everyone, they are dealing with lots and lots of, people and clients, and from different culture. And so they can have, I think, a very rich manual of nonverbal clues.
Great, thank you. And there's a second part to this question. During the intake process, again, in some cultures, female patients do not speak, but instead the men speak for them. This creates an enormous challenge in acquiring information from the women in these cultures. How do we manage this challenge while maintaining cultural sensitivity?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I cannot, I don't have an answer from that from the book, but from experience, I mean, dealing with, we have seen that in many ways, and in many times, whoever is doing the more talk is just culturally, by default, they are the boss or they are on the forefront. And again, the idea of a self-esteem for the other part who is not talking, who are shy, is in the back. But maybe just again, indirectly and unintentionally posing the question to the person directly, and maybe something relating to her. This way, it's okay to say, I would like to know your opinion on that topic. I'm so interested to know that from your point of view, right? So empowering the person in an indirect way could be useful. And if the person, again, would create, I don't know, a long-term confident relationship, it would be, they will open up and, I think will open up and be advocate from the self. It's very challenging, I have to say, especially for people coming from war zone and so on, and they have been for the majority of their life in their houses or in places they haven't exchanged with anyone. They don't know language, they don't even know the language, and so they depend on the other partner to speak on their behalf. I have volunteered a lot with the refugees when they arrive in Canada, because I speak Arabic. And so I have seen, a progression. So they started not talking and being shy and, withdrawing a little bit, until one point they know the language, they took some classes, they have some network, they have support group and people to confide, and they have transformed. So it really depends on the setting, and I think the patient of the person, dealing with them, I think.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that experience. And I do see that we have other questions here, lots of them for you, Dr. Dakroury. We will move all your questions to our N4 Platforms meeting place, and Dr. Dakroury will be answering your questions there. As well, we'll post an on-demand version of this webinar with a transcript as well. And my colleague Andrew is going to put the link to become a member to N4 in the chat box. We also invite you all to attend future events. Communication is very dynamic, so we do have a part 2 with Dr. Dakroury. We will be welcoming her back on March 17th from 1 to 2, and we hope to see you there. And we also have a survey. We invite your feedback on this webinar. Andrew will put that in the chat as well, and it should pop up in your browser following the webinar. But we really do value your feedback. It helps us to improve. And I'm just going to ask Dr. Dakroury, do you have any final words for the group?
No, thank you very. Actually, I just saw the question answer now, so it's a new feature for me. I thank you very much. I have to admit I was very hesitant in the beginning to really have, audio video. I'm not a fan of photos, and those who know me, they know that very well. But actually, it's a big pleasure to interact with the newcomer navigator. I think it's an invaluable resource for many in Canada, and I'm looking forward your attendees' feedback in the questionnaire that unfolds everywhere. And in the next workshop that will be on the 17th, I will be sharing more hands-on about perception, about creating messages, about responding to message, about also the importance of listening. This is something that we lack a lot in our life, including myself, listening. And I will focus also, I will dedicate some segment in nonverbal communication, because it flags lots in our real life. And finally, conflict, because I think also conflict in workplace is one of the biggest things that we are facing, but sometimes we are shy to express, we are shy or afraid to disclose information. So I will tackle these in the next workshop. So if people would gladly, will kindly mention this in the questionnaire, that would be cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.